What if the most honest connection of your life came from someone you were never meant to see that way? I was 46, settled, remarried, and living a life of quiet routines. But all it took was one unexpected visit. One evening of unspoken truths and a presence I hadn't felt in years. To remind me that even the most composed hearts can still tremble. This is not a love story. This is a story about being seen. And the night I remembered who I really was. My name is Claire. I'm 46 years old. For the past 2 years, I've been remarried. No children, no pets, and often, no warm arms to greet me in the morning. My days unfold quietly in a wooden cabin tucked into the mountains of Asheville. The lavender I tend with care perfumes the air, and my afternoons are filled with the turning of book pages and the soft hum of jazz in the background. My husband travels frequently. This week, he's in New York again. So I find myself alone once more. That night, I made dinner just for myself. A familiar menu, pan-seared salmon, roasted vegetables, and a glass of white wine. The kitchen glowed warmly beneath the pendant light, casting a soft halo over everything. The jazz played on like a lullaby, wrapping the evening in a kind of quiet nostalgia. I was playing the role I knew too well, the content wife who had learned to live with solitude. Then, the doorbell rang. It was already 8 p.m. I hesitated, surprised. When I peeked through the door, I saw Evan, my husband's son from his previous marriage. He stood there with a casual rucksack over his shoulder and a suitcase behind him. "It's been a while," he said with a nervous smile. 8 months had passed since I last saw Evan. He joined us briefly for lunch then, polite and distant. Now he looked weary but composed. "My car broke down halfway from Raleigh," he explained. "Roadside assistance was delayed. Would it be okay if I stayed the night?" My heart fluttered. Not out of fear, but from an emotion I couldn't immediately name. "Of course," I said, stepping aside. "Would you like tea, wine, or hot cocoa?" He smiled. "If you still have that dark cocoa you used to keep hidden." I was stunned for a moment. That cocoa was my little secret, low sugar, rich, comforting. I never told anyone about it. But he remembered. I warmed the milk, and we sat by the window, each with a steaming mug in hand. The house felt different somehow, not just warm, but alive. The clinking of our cups echoed gently in the quiet. His hand brushed mine as he reached for his mug. I froze, not because it was cold, but because it didn't feel like the hand of the boy I used to know. Evan had grown. His presence now carried weight, maturity. And I felt my age and yet something else too. Something I hadn't felt in years, seen. We spoke softly about forgotten mornings, his childhood, the smell of pancakes, the chaos of school runs, the silence that followed every goodbye. In the pauses, something unspoken stirred. He looked at me in a way that made me feel unguarded, exposed, not in danger, but as though he saw past the layers I wore each day. I looked away, afraid that if I let him see too much, I'd lose the clarity I'd clung to for so long. I awoke early the next morning to sunlight slipping through the curtains. Evan slept on the living room couch. I had laid out a blanket and turned on the heater before going to bed. Just hospitality. Just kindness. I brewed coffee, the scent of roasted Arabica rising slowly. Then came footsteps, measured, gentle. "You're up early," he said with a sleepy grin. "It's a habit," I replied. He took a seat across from me in the kitchen. There was a stillness between us, not uncomfortable, but fragile. Soft. He asked if the orchid on the porch had survived. I nodded. Barely. But it always finds a way to come back. His gaze lingered. Like people, right? Something in me paused. Not at the words themselves, but the way he said them, as if we were both looking at the same broken place inside ourselves. We stepped out to the porch with our coffee. Mist hovered gently above the grass. He sat beside me, quiet, thoughtful. "I had a strange dream," he said. "What dream isn't strange?" I teased. "I dreamt I was here. And someone held my hand." I didn't know how to respond. My fingers tightened around my mug. Have I ever asked about your mother? I'd changed the subject. No, he said after a pause. Maybe because you didn't want to take her place. His honesty struck a chord deep within me. Not because it hurt, but because it illuminated how many roles I had avoided or hidden from. His gaze didn't flinch. Maybe I've placed you in a space I don't fully understand. I should have turned away. I should have changed the subject. But I asked quietly in that dream, did she let go? No, he said. She left it there. Our hands rested near each other, barely apart. Not touching. Just close enough. He didn't move. Neither did I. There was no passion. No line crossed. But something shifted, something real. Are you afraid? He asked softly. Not of this moment, I said, after a long pause. I'm more afraid of how used I've become to hiding my heart. We sat in silence, two people on the edge of something undefined. Something unnameable. He stood and retrieved a shawl from the chair, wrapping it around my shoulders. You're getting cold, he whispered. For a second, I looked into his eyes. They didn't belong to a boy. They carried the quiet depth of someone who had lived through longing. I'm almost 2 decades older than you, I said. He smiled. Since when has the heart asked for ID? I laughed, but it wasn't from amusement. It was from the realization that tears might follow if I didn't. He reached out, not to hold, not to claim, but simply to anchor us both in the present. We didn't embrace. We didn't kiss. But emotionally, something opened. The wall that separated us from loneliness fell, if only for a day. Later, we ate dinner. Udon with ginger and scallions. The chopsticks clinked gently in our bowls. Outside, the wind rustled the trees like an old lullaby. Inside, we said little. There was no need to. I'm still adjusting to the way you look at me, I said. He replied, do you want me to stop? No. I just want to understand why. Because you don't pretend. You don't act like you're younger. You don't hide your sadness. You just are. That quiet acknowledgement hit me harder than anything else. For so long, I had longed for someone to see me, not the idea of me, not the role I played, but the person beneath. We sat by the lamp for hours, barely moving. Do you think some moments are only meant to be felt once? He asked. Yes, I whispered. And some people don't realize when to stop. And do you? He asked. I think I do. Because if we don't pause now, we may never be able to share coffee again and sit in peace. He smiled. Then let's just stay here tonight. No words. No gestures. Just this moment. I nodded. And we did. That night, I awoke not from a dream or fear, but from silence. I found Evan still asleep on the couch. I tucked the blanket around him and sat quietly on the floor beside him, watching him sleep, not out of longing, but from gratitude. Thank you, I whispered, for reminding me that I'm not just someone's wife, not just someone's stepmother, but a woman, still full of life, still capable of feeling. As morning came, we drank coffee without a word about the previous night. We talked about flowers and documentaries we never finished. When he left, we didn't hug. No promises. Just a nod that said, thank you for knowing when to stop. Not every bond becomes a relationship. Not every spark is meant to become fire. But even one moment of being truly seen, without masks, without expectations, can change the course of a life. And sometimes, that's more than enough. Sometimes life gifts us a single, fleeting moment, one that never asks to be defined, only felt. It doesn't come wrapped in certainty or tied to promises. It doesn't follow the rules we're taught about love, boundaries, or time. It simply arrives, gently, unexpectedly, and reminds us that we are still alive inside. That even in the quiet ache of solitude, there's a spark waiting to be seen. Evan didn't change my life. He reminded me that it still belonged to me. Not every connection is meant to last. Not every hand we touch is meant to be held forever. But some are meant to find us when we forget who we are, just to say, you are still here. And sometimes, that's all we need to keep going. If you've ever shared a quiet, beautiful moment with someone that changed something inside you, even if just for a night? Leave a comment below. Let the world know you felt it too. And if this story moved something in you, subscribe. Because sometimes, all it takes is a single story to bring you back to life. Speech balloon candle.